Hi everybody, welcome back to Ready, Set, Pivot. Let's get into our last two common training challenges. What do you do if someone asks you a question and you're not sure of the answer? And what do you do if a learning activity you have planned doesn't go well? Okay, so the first one is pretty simple. If somebody asks you a question and you're unsure of the answer, there are a few different ways to respond. They all begin with being honest and letting your participants know that you don't know, and that is absolutely okay. Most people will just appreciate your honesty compared to you trying to kind of come up with something that sounds good on the spot, but probably reflects that you might not know the answer. So here's some different language that I like to use when responding to this type of a scenario. Number one, that's a really great question. I actually don't know the answer to that, so let me do some research and I'll get back to you and we can talk about that. Number two, I like to ask the group if anybody else knows. So I might say something like, I'm actually not sure of the answer to that question. I'm curious if anybody in the group knows the answer. Number three, you can always pause and tell the group, hey, I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I would like to figure that out because that's a really great question. Let's all take a couple minutes and do some research and figure out the exact answer to that question. And then number four, you can always ask Siri. Just kidding. Unless you want to. Honesty and authenticity is key here. Nobody expects you to know everything. I think most people struggle more if you are someone who acts like you know everything, knowing that that's just not possible. Okay, so don't feel like it's a knock on your confidence or your validity as an instructor. People appreciate honesty. Okay, we're gonna move on to our last common training challenge. A learning activity does not go well during a training. What do you do? First of all, I wanna say that this has happened to me many, many times because I like to try new ideas. Sometimes as trainers, we can kind of get stuck in a rut doing the same things over and over. I'm totally okay trying something for the first time with the risk that it might not go well. But I like to tell my group, hey everyone, this is the first time I've ever done an activity like this. I want us to process the content in this way, but it might not actually go super well. So I want to give you a little bit of a heads up. I think it's really interesting. I think this activity could be great, but just so you know, I haven't done it before. Again, being honest with my group is really, really helpful. Okay, so now let's dive into what do you actually do if one of these activities do not go well. Number one, pivot in the moment. If something's not going well, I might just say, hey, we're actually gonna stop. I changed my mind. Instead of doing this, I want you to do this instead. So always have different activities kind of in the back of your mind or written down that you can do if one of your planned activities doesn't go well. Number two, again, be honest. Just tell your participants, hey, that didn't actually go well. I'm gonna remember that for next time. Thank you for trying that activity with me. I really appreciate that. But I do know that I will change it for the next group. So kind of thank you for going through that activity with me. And people just, again, they appreciate the honesty. And then number three, if things aren't going well, sometimes it's because certain participants like doing certain types of activities compared to others. So the way that you can kind of mitigate that is to give options. What I want people to do in a training is to think and process information they just learned or practice it. I don't really care how they do that. So one way to meet learners' needs better is to actually provide them options with different activities they can do to process information. So maybe if it is writing down 4 main ideas and connecting them together, great processing activity. If it's talking with somebody around you and having a discussion, excellent processing activity. There are different things you can do. Give your learners some options and see what they lean towards. That is always a really, really healthy environment because again, it tells your learners, hey, I'm here to support your learning. And so I'm gonna give you options to be able to process content in a way that best suits you. All right, speaking of processing activities, what I'd like you to do right now is to think about a training you have coming up and come up with some different activity options within that training. So maybe you have a spot in your training where you are actually introducing a new tool that you are using, and you've gone through why it's important, and you want your learners to be able to process and think about that information. What are 3 different ways that they could process that information? Maybe it's having a discussion. Maybe it's writing down one of the challenges that they're facing and potentially how this new tool could help mitigate that challenge. Maybe you have them write down 3 different reasons why this training is important. Come up with 3 different activities, 4 different activities that you can use for an upcoming training that can be options for your learners. Okay, welcome back. So let's go over some key points that we discussed in this video. Number 1, it is okay to try something new, and sometimes things don't go as planned. You will only know what works best by continuing to try new things to figure out what activities work best in certain environments. That's the art of teaching. That's the art of instruction. Number 2, what can you do when you do an activity and it doesn't go well? You can pivot to a new activity. You can be honest with your learners and let them know, hey, that didn't really go very well. I apologize for that. I will consider that the next time I host a training. And number 3, you can kind of get ahead of it by giving options to your participants so that they can pick an activity that they are most comfortable with. Again, if you have more ideas, write them down. The idea is to have a menu of things that you can use in the moment if you find yourself facing one of these common training challenges. Okay, so this wraps up the Ready, Set, Pivot strategy portion. I will see you in the last video where I will share some amazing thoughts and ideas for you as you continue to grow in your impact and skills as an amazing trainer. See you soon.